Okay, I'm going to get started now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Clean Code, Your Software Done Right webinar. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kirti Joshi. I'm the Senior Manager of Enterprise Product Marketing at Sonar. And today I have with me my colleague, Fabrice Bellinga, VP of Products. And so before we go over some more intros, I'm going to go over some of quick housekeeping reminders for everyone. This is a 30-minute session that includes a Q&A. Throughout the session, you can submit your questions via the Q&A box on Zoom, not the chat box, but the Q&A box. We have two panelists today, Colin from the community management team and Eric from the services team, who will triage all your questions. Some they will directly answer in the chat during the webinar, and some they will queue up for us to answer at the end of the presentation. This session is recorded, and in a few days, you will receive an email with the recording. In addition to that, after the webinar, we are going to send you a short survey. Please tell us what you liked, what we should improve on, and what topics we should cover in upcoming sessions. So I'm now going to hand it over to Fabrice, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself.
Hi, everyone. So Fabrice, I'm the VP of Products at Sonar, and I joined the company 12 years ago. I've been doing mainly product management all this time. And prior to this, I worked for many companies, almost always on topics connected to open source, which I'm a fan of, and code quality, which is the reason why I joined Sonar in the first place.
Thank you, Fabrice. And as for me, I lead the product marketing team at Sonar. And I started my career about 18 years ago writing code for hardware and software products. And over the last 7 years or so, I've been trying to create awareness for open source and commercial developer tools that allow developers to innovate and be efficient with the code and applications that they deliver. All right, so I'm going to move on. So we've come a long way in our software development journey. If you really think about it, a few decades ago, we all started with the do-it-yourself model, where, packages, tests, merges were all kind of, manually built and performed. And over these years, this flow has matured and it's become quite sophisticated and automated today with DevOps. And so you'll agree that so much has changed, and all these elements that you see here have already or will become a commodity. But what hasn't really changed in this evolution is the source code. The source code is the core asset of your software. Actually, we like to call it as the heartbeat of your application. And we think of software as two sections, kind of like two sections of a tree. The visible part that contains the business logic and the features that dictate how your application actually behaves. So what functionality does it have? What services does it render? And this is actually what you see. This is what you specify when you write the software. And then there is this other part, the hidden part, what you don't see. So how your software will perform, how it will evolve, meaning is it maintainable, is it reliable, is it safe? Think about it as all the non-functional requirements of code. And this is what we actually define when the software is specified. And so you'll see today, most organizations give a lot of focus on the visible part of software, that is the functionality of the code. But we feel that they need to give equal attention or even more to the non-functional requirements. So we've talked about source code right now, and we all know that developers and only developers in your organization are closest to this. They are the ones who, touch code on an everyday basis. They are the ones who are, innovating. And in fact, they are the real behind the scene heroes of organizations today. And so it's a reality that if developers are working on the right tasks, they can really accelerate your project's success. And we truly believe that clean code tooling in the hands of developers can help organizations achieve this. So to put it a bit into perspective, we know that code is growing at a rapid pace. And not only that, complexities are mounting by the day. And applications today are just not, new code or just legacy code. They, in fact, are a mix of both. And if your code is not clean, it's going to put your businesses at risk. So developers today are actually spending a lot of time dealing with the quality issues in code. On an average, a developer is spending about 17 hours per week on bad code. And what I mean by bad code is solving maintenance issues, debugging, refactoring, reading code, modifying code. And that's a lot of time kind of spent on this. And organizations today are increasing the number of developers year over year. More developers are being hired. And so if they're not leveraged to do their best work, they're going to get frustrated. And this, we feel, is a major economic loss for the business overall. And then on the other hand, the applications that are not maintained inherently become vulnerable to failures and security risks. And so really the economic impact of bad code is quite huge. And we believe that this clean code mindset and some key best practices can really help everyone. So moving on, I mentioned clean code, of step back and reflect on what clean code really is. So we define clean code as code that is secure, is of the highest quality, and it executes flawlessly. And this includes all properties of code, meaning security, maintainability, reliability, portability, readability, and so on. And this actually applies to all code, not only source code, but scripting code or glue logic, test code, infrastructure as code as well. So when your code is actually maintainable, it's reliable, it's clean, it's free of issues, it's going to reduce all types of risks, be it operational risk for your everyday things to perform, security risk, and even the reputation of your organization. And another thing is that it's going to reduce your maintenance time and costs. We feel that when there are fewer issues to fix, developers can really focus on the right things, on the things that are exciting, and not on constant cleanup of code. And as a result of all of this, your application is going to have a longer shelf life. You don't need to throw your application because it's not maintainable anymore, or it doesn't perform according to spec. I like to give this analogy of a clean, unclean, or clean inbox. So if you're not keeping it organized, you're not keeping it clean, you're going to find it very, very difficult to maintain it. You're going to miss all those important emails. And it's the same thing with code. If you don't fix it right now, it's going to get out of hand, and your application will eventually need to be replaced. So everyone understands by now that clean code is probably immensely important, but enabling it can seem very, very daunting. And the challenge is that there is so much code and so many issues. The code base is ballooning by the day. So where should you really start? What should I prioritize? And ultimately, who's responsible for fixing all these issues? So I'm going to pass it over to Fabrice, and he's going to tell you about some best practices to deal with this challenge. This is all why we've gathered here today. And you can do this no matter how big or small your code base is. There's something in for everyone. Fabrice, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Kirti. And before we look at this, I want to launch a quick poll. So how good is your understanding of the quality of your code base? So I give you a couple of seconds. Maybe you haven't started looking at it just yet. Maybe you already have some sound tuning and processes. We are really curious to see how you're actually currently doing this. So we see quite a lot of you who have a good understanding of your own project, but necessarily on every part of it. I think it's 34% of the answers. A few haven't studied already, and a few have very good and strong processes. Great. Thank you for your answers. I'm going to stop it now. So how do we start on clean code? As Kirti said, developers are the real heroes today, and at Sonar Source, we strongly believe that only them can have an impact on the quality of their code. So as a leader, you need to arm them with two things. First, a proper tooling. So a proper tooling which meets those three requirements. It has to be very well integrated in the developer's existing tools, as well as in their daily workflows. If there is just a bit of friction, chances are that it won't get adopted. Your team doesn't want to waste time. This tool also has to give the right information at the right time. When you are coding, you want information to come quickly. In your pull request, it can come in a couple of minutes. But if it doesn't come at the right time, you're going to miss it, and you're going to miss the value of such a tool. The third point is the information has to be very precise with a low false positive rate. Here again, if as a developer, you are wondering every time you see an issue if this is a real issue or not, chances are that at some point you feel you're losing your time and you're not going to keep on using the tool. So tooling is the first thing. The second thing is education. When you have the tool that shows you the issues that are on your code, it's just one part of the job. Then as a developer, obviously you will have to fix this issue. And for this, you want to understand why is this an issue? If I don't fix it, what's the impact of not fixing it? And most importantly, how can I fix it? Can I have some tips? Can I have some code that shows me what I can do to fix that problem? So this is something that you also need to arm your developers with if you want them to be able to take the full responsibility of the quality of their code. And yet, this is not enough. When you start using such a tool, chances are that you see something like this. A lot of issues that are unveiled that were hidden in your code, and all of a sudden you see them. And then you're like, okay, what do I do with this? So maybe you want just to close your laptop and forget about it, or you will brace yourself and you will start digging into this huge amount of issues, trying to understand where you can get started to have the biggest impacts. We believe that it's not efficient, and there is definitely another way. So what is the best practice for this? We call it clean as you code. And clean as you code is an approach which in fact is very simple and very powerful. The idea is you don't look at what already exists on the code base, you just focus on the code that you are adding to the code base. So by adding, we mean the code that's you add for the feature, or the code that you also touch to plug your feature in the existing code base. And you do this as you are writing the code. So it's very little overhead. You do this while the code is fresh in your mind. It's your own code. You don't need to load the context around an issue that is found. You know everything because that's what you've just written. So no rework. It's part of your daily work to write code. It's non-disruptive. It's not like if you are asked, or if you ask for a budget, for instance, for 2 weeks to dive into the code and fix as many issues as you can. This is not something fun. Chances are that you are going to work on code that belongs to someone else that you don't understand. You are feared to introduce regressions because maybe the code is not well tested. So just focusing on the code that you write, you own, is a very little overhead. And in fact, it will allow you to do what you like doing, which is to solve interesting problems, to innovate, and at the end of the day, to do your best work. So because a picture is worth 1,000 words, on the left, you see what you could get with the first analysis on your repository. Tons of issues, tons of bugs, you don't know where to get started. If you focus on the code that was recently touched or added, on the right, all of a sudden, it's a lot smaller subset of issues. And if you have a tool which can also point you at which of those few issues are yours, which ones you introduced recently, it's even a smaller set of issues that is very easy to manage and that is not going to take you too much time. So to implement clean as you code, you just need to keep in mind two things, two simple steps. The first one is something that you have to do once. You set up a quality gate on the new code for your project, not on the overall code, but just the code that is going to be added or modified. That's something you do once on your project. And then you need to enforce a rule, which is you don't release or promote code as long as the quality gate is not green. These are just the two simple steps that you need to keep in mind to implement effectively clean as you code. So obviously there is this question of, but what does new code mean? And the answer is it really depends on your context and how your teams are working. At Sonar Source, for instance, teams are doing 2 or 3 week sprints. So in the context of the sprint, this new code will be 2 or 3 weeks. And at the end of the sprint, the team will be sure that everything they touch during these 2 or 3 weeks will be clean. On SonarQube, for instance, we have a 2 months release cycle. We have a new code, which is these 2 months between a version that was just released and the next version, which ensures that everything that will be pushed during those 2 months will be clean. So new code, it depends on your context. Now, the quality gate, that's something that you have to use as your key metric. And everybody has to understand that when the quality gate is failed, the code is not promoted. It doesn't go to production. It's not shipped. There's something to do about it. And every developer needs to be aware of that. You also need to ensure that when the quality gate is not passed, when it turns to fail, there is an immediate action that is taken to make it passed again as soon as possible. And why is that? Just because if it's just failed, the issues are probably very fresh in the developer's mind, so a lot easier and less costly to fix. So in Sonar, we have a default quality gate which focuses on the new code. We recommend that you start with it. You can add some more on top of this later on, but just with this default quality gate, you can start clean as you code with your team. The good thing with clean as you code is that not only the code that you're adding for the new features is going to be clean, but you are also going to progressively clean the whole code base. And why is that? Because when you add a feature, when you add new code, you need to touch existing code to plug your feature in this code. And usually you are going to rewrite some parts to be able to plug that feature. Industry standards say that about 20% of a code base gets rewritten every year. And this is something, by the way, that we validated on our own code base, on the SonarQube code base. That's the reality. So this means that if tomorrow you start implementing clean as you code with your team, you can be sure that in a year from now, 20% of your code base will be clean. And in 5 years, you can expect something around like half of your code to be clean without much overhead on the day-to-day basis. So I'm going to hand it over back to Kirti to see how all of this fits into the dev workflows.
Thank you, Fabrice. So in all of this, Sonar operates on the extreme left of your development workflow. So if you look at this traditional approach to kind of handling the quality and security of your code, it can be very inefficient. One, because this is occurring much later in your development cycle after the code is written. Second, the analysis is lengthy. It takes long, even up to hours. And the feedback to fix the issues is very, very long. And so now there's this slow kind of mindset shift where the dev-owned approach is really emerging. And the tooling for that is also improving. Also, we help you perform checks at every step in your CI/CD and pull requests with SonarQube and Sonar Cloud. And this solution fits really well into your current development workflow, in your DevOps workflow. So this is a classic, DevOps infinity loop that you've seen multiple times. So right from the time you start coding, you commit, you push, you are able to perform static analysis as you code in your ID with SonarLint. It'll squiggle flaws for you, and it'll give you good guidance on how to fix them. And that fix is adapted to your actual code. And SonarLint already does, a great job here in the IDE. And now there are additional checks as part of your DevOps in your DevOps platform with Sonar Cube and Sonar Cloud. And so the idea is that no issues will escape to production. That's the goal. So now Fabrice talked about, quality gate a few slides ago. And the whole idea here is that, when you have a passing quality gate, your source code is good, you can merge it, you can promote it, it's ready for production. However, if your quality gate does fail, then you need to go back, fix it, and go through the cycle again. We want to point out that the Sonar solution supports all the programming language. So today you might be programming in Java, JavaScript. Tomorrow you might be programming in a different language. So we support 30+ programming languages, frameworks, and infrastructure technologies. And we also cover a large number of rules. So our philosophy is that we raise issues when we know there's a problem that you need to address. And when we are not too sure about it, we raise it as a hotspot. So you can actually go and review it manually. And we do this on all types of issues. So from simple things like dead code, duplicated code, to even some complex things like complicated regular expression patterns, or password or secret detection in your code, or even cognitive complexity issues, or some kind of ISE misconfigurations. All these types of issues are handled. So we're going to leave you with a few key takeaways from this session. So if there's anything that you took away, is that source code is the key asset of your application. Build it clean, keep it secure, make sure that it's of the highest quality, and make sure that it also executes flawlessly. And devs, and only devs, can make a significant impact on your code. So arm them with the right tooling, the right education, so that they can do this right. And then the clean as you code practice with Sonar can help you get to that clean code state. And you can actually do this no matter the state of your code base, or the complexity of it, the size of your organization, or even the maturity of your team today. Thank you for listening, and we are going to open it up for more audience questions. Colin, over to you.
Hey, Kirti, thanks. So you talked about education, and there's already a lot of resources on the web. What does Sonar bring that's more than what already exists?
Yeah, I can take that one. So indeed, there are lots of things on the web, and usually this is where developers will go to find some resources to implement some algorithm, try to fix some problems, etc. What we do with Sonar is, instead of having to go and search for information somewhere, this information will be brought to you at the time you need it. This is when you face an issue. Let's say that you are facing a potential SQL injection in your code. You will have the information right at your fingertips that explains what a SQL injection is, what you risk with this, and some examples that you can take a look at to fix this problem. So it's at the time you need it. It's not like you need to look for this information somewhere else. It comes to you. And something which is also interesting is the information that is provided on how to fix it is going to be contextual to your code, which means that it's not going to be some random code that you can find on Stack Overflow or on whatever other website, which maybe you don't understand, or which is very simple. It's something which is connected to, for instance, the libraries that you are using, and it gives you some solutions which are relevant to your own context. It's not a random example. So this is what this education within Sonar that you can get.
Sure, thanks. And Raja had a question that was very smart. They asked, so are you Sonar or Sonar Cube? And they think that the new name of Sonar is Sonar Cube. Can you talk a little bit about the different products and how it all wraps up into the Sonar solution?
Yes, sure. Sonar is the solution to enable you to write clean code. And in your workflows as a developer, you have multiple places where Sonar will help. So at the most important part is as you write your code, it's in the IDE. So this is what is called Sonar Lints, and Sonar Lint is an IDE extension where you will get this feedback almost instantaneously, and you also get this educative content right inside the IDE. So that's Sonar Lints as you write, so kind of a spell checker. And then you have Sonar Cube and Sonar Cloud who come afterwards in the DevOps process. So usually they are configured in your CI/CD process. And Sonar Cube and Sonar Cloud will act as a safety net. Every time you push some code, they will look at everything that belongs to your repository, will find the new issues, and especially if you are relying on this quality gate on the new code, they will find the issues, notify you that there are some new issues, generate the quality gate to prevent some automated deployment to be done, for instance. So that's the different parts where the products fit. So those products all belong to Sonar as a solution. They're just in different parts of your workflows.
Thanks. Sophia asked who in the company should be defining rules for Sonar. And I'd like to kind of broaden that question a little bit. When someone starts using the Sonar solution, where do users start? What comes out of the box and what flexibility do they have? And who do you think in the organization should really be influencing things like rule selection?
Okay. So our recommendation is to start with the default quality profiles. In the same way, we have a default quality gate which focuses on the new code. Sonar comes with what we call the Sonar way profiles. These profiles, they include rules which are relevant for almost everybody. Usually they are rules that no one will challenge. And you can get started with this. Chances are that it's going to work for most teams, most languages, and they will get already a lot of benefit from this. Then you can discuss within your team if you have some specific needs for your own code. You can discuss whether it makes sense to have a dedicated quality profile for your team for those specific needs, in which case, what you can do is to, for instance, extend the default quality profile and add some rules which make sense for you. In larger organizations, usually what will happen is that there are some teams who are looking at this for the broader scope of engineering teams. And these teams, usually they are going to lead this kind of discussion, like at the company level, what kind of profiles we want to provide the teams with, and that activate or deactivate some rules because for them, it makes more sense. So as you can see, there are some different levels. It will depend on your maturity in using these tools and obviously the size of your company.
Thanks. And we have time for just one more question. So you talked in the presentation about how it's really important that developers focus on new code and leave the legacy code behind. I'm curious, from your perspective, what should a team do after they've cleaned all of their new code? Go on vacation, have a coffee. What should they really do next?
So what they can do next is, if already they have put clean as you code in practice, that's already a lot. As we understood, with little overhead, they are going to have a code base that is going to be cleaner and cleaner. So that's already a lot. Now, what they can do is look at the overall code and benefit from all the investigation features that you can have with Sonar to identify some places where maybe there are things to do with some bugs or some vulnerabilities, keeping in mind that, well, if some code is in production and if some code is untouched for quite a while, maybe you should be careful when you want to make some modifications on the code, especially when the code is not well tested. So you have to keep that in mind, that yes, it's good to look at what you can do more. And if the code hasn't been touched, maybe it's that it is stable enough and that you don't need to necessarily take a look at it.
Great. Thanks, Fabrice. That's all the time we have for questions, but other folks that have asked questions in the Q&A box, when we send up a wrap up of the webinar in a few days, we'll have answered many of those questions for you in our community. Thanks, Kirti and Fabrice.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending.